Hi, boys and girls. This is Mrs. P, and I am back, and we are reading chapter 11 of Pictures of Hollis Woods. And if you remember correctly, this young girl, I can't remember now what happened to her parents, but she's in foster parent situation, and so she's been moved around, but she's got a couple of places that really meant a lot to her, and she's kind of trying to get back there. So let's continue on. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to go back and start with this book. The Time with Josie. I'm just going to point this out. Josie's one of the ladies. I think she's the latest lady who is her foster parent, and she really likes her. But this woman is starting to get she's starting to get forgetful, and so Hollis is or Rachel is she's really afraid that she's going to be taken to a different foster home, and that's not what she wants. So, chapter 11. The next afternoon, I went from room to room, taking my time, looking at everything. Almost everything. I didn't go into Izzy and the old man's bedroom. That was their private place. Photographs filled the guest room wall, and I spent a long time looking at each one. I waited to get to the end to see if there was one of me still there. First, there was a young Izzy in a two-piece bathing suit, then the old man sawing down a dead tree, sawdust coloring his beard. There were several of Stephen, one without his front tooth in a bunny costume, one sitting on the hood of the truck, and one with the fishnet in his hand, and his head thrown back, laughing. And the one of me was still there. I was sharpening a pencil, with pale pink shavings falling in a pile on my drawing paper. I ran my finger over it. Still there, in the row with the others, still belonging with them. Stephen's room was next, a mess of a room. Socks on the floor, a jumble of string, a couple of keys, and a photo on the dresser. A photo I couldn't even make out, blurs of greens and blues, and something in the center that might have been the boat. Behind me, Josie called. "I found boots. I'm going to wear them." "It's too cold to go out," I called back. "You'll freeze." But the outside door slammed, and I went to the window. "Josie?" I put my hand on the glass. Cold air drifted in around the panes. Josie was wearing Izzy's wet wading boots, which went up to her thighs. She twirled in the snow, arms out, fingers spread. Made me dizzy just to watch her. After a moment, she tipped over, but it was an easy fall, making me think of snow angels. Her scarf blew across the smooth whiteness, a scrap of color. She was up again, zigzagging, and I thought about going after her as she disappeared in back of the line of evergreens. I hurried a little, grabbing my jacket. The thermometer outside the kitchen window read 5 degrees, and next to the window on the wall, the calendar was still at August. I went out the back door, calling to her, and then, in the cold stillness, I could hear her singing. "Over the river." I went after her, my feet heavy, twirling as I passed the circles she had made, singing back, "And through the woods." She leaned against a small tree, staring at the thin strip of dark water that ran between the chunks of ice. "Isn't it beautiful?" I said. "I love to walk in the snow." She was shivering again, looking up at me, suddenly bewildered. But why aren't we home? And what happened to Beatrice?" I led her back into the house, into that warm room with the bright blue rugs and the huge couch. I found a robe of Izzy's in hand and wrapped it around her. We sat by the fireplace, watching the shadows dance over the walls until it grew dark outside, and we slept. In the morning, points of light danced over my eyes. I raised my hand to my face. Sun was melting tiny swirls of ice on the window. Somewhere outside was a faint buzzing sound. It wasn't close, nothing to worry about, but what was it? Someone using a saw deep in the woods? A snowmobile? The sound gradually died away, and I stood up slowly, thinking about breakfast. There were choices, thanks to Izzy. Cans of pineapple juice, blackberry jam, vegetables shiny in their glass jars, rows of Dinty Moore stew. Izzy's treasures, not mine. I'd pay her back someday, I told myself. Pay back all of it. Lighten up, Stephen said in my head. I had to smile. That's really what he would have said. I unclenched my hands and took another look outside. Footprints crisscrossed the snow. Our footprints. I thought about them uneasily, glancing up at the sky, wishing for more snow to hide them. I put water on to boil and popped a piece of Josie's bread into the toaster. A mouse lived somewhere in the house. Poor mouse, he'd have to leave now that Henry was here. I wiped away the mouse's leavings with a brush and then sat at the table in front of the window with Josie's wood pieces on one side and my food lined up in front of me. After I ate, I looked at the tree figure Josie was doing of me, a long piece of wood, spaces drilled in the sides where the arms would be, a face beginning to take shape, a mouth begun, a small pointed nose, and a tiny cut on the forehead. I put my hand up to my own forehead, feeling that indentation. And then Josie was there, yawning, her hair a whoosh around her head. She pattered over to the back window. Sun today, she said, holding her hands out as if to warm them against the glass, and a branch that's blown onto the step. Holly, I think. I took the last bit of toast crust and crunched it into my mouth. The sun on the ocean makes a path sometimes. Josie reached for a chocolate bar. You think you can walk on it, walk clear across the ocean, too. She stopped, and I tried to help her. To England? To France? To where I belong. She sat at the table and began to work. As I put toast and hot tea in front of her, she glanced around. What? I asked. I'm wondering about Beatrice, she said, and smiled. And sandpaper. Your face needs some smoothing. There might be sandpaper in the shed. I'd get it. I didn't have to look at the truck again. I'd pretend it wasn't there. So I opened the back door to a blast of cold air. So cold your teeth hurt, the old man had said, and saw the holly branch, thick with bright red berries that had blown across the step. Stephen holding a sprig of holly out to me. Peace, Holly. I'll get my jacket, I told Josie, and I shrugged into it, pulled on my gloves, and went outside for the sandpaper. The cold went through me, the smell of it, sharp and clean. The mustard woman was far away, probably looking for me. She didn't have a clue, or she wouldn't have a clue. On the way back, I bent down and picked up the holly to bring into the house. I gave Josie the squares of sandpaper and then put the branch in one of Izzy's vases in front of the big window, thinking about Christmas. Maybe 10 more days. Josie and I would have our own. I'd cut boughs of pine, and we had packs of popcorn to make. It would be like Christmas in a book by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I was happier than I had been anywhere, except I didn't belong in that house in Branches. Not anymore. I wondered what Christmas was like in the old man's winter house, what it would be like this year. I snipped off that thought before I finished it. Wasn't it enough that I was here in Branches with Holly in the window? If only I could stay forever. Something else the old man had told me about fishing in the winter. The fish went deep, but if you caught one, the eating was an experience. An experience. The old man used words like that. Fish for dinner dotted with butter, no butter. Ah, fish smothered in tomato sauce and string beans jarred last summer. A real meal, the way normal people ate. Better than normal. I know you like fish, I said to Josie. Goldfish. I had one in a bowl, I think. She glanced at Henry, who slept in the middle of one of the old man's blue rugs. I don't trust Henry, though. To eat, I mean for us. She looked across at me, shocked. I'd never eat a goldfish. I could feel the laughter bubble up. Pickerel, I said. Bass. I'm not sure what's around this time of year. Ah, yes. She picked up her knife to shave curly bits off the wooden feet. The old man's fishing equipment was hanging on the far wall. Did I really want to go into that icy world? Of course I did. In Stephen's bedroom, I gathered things to keep warm. His old green sweater for a scarf around my neck, an extra pair of socks.
Please make sure that the scholars bring their laptops.
I found a
and
towel
their
in the hall
chargers
closet to
home.
wrap around my
Everybody
head
was
like a
given
turban,
computer bag. Make sure
and
that they
one
get
of
those.
Izzy's
Hopefully
large
they're
sweaters
labeled,
to
and
put over the
they
whole
have
thing.
them daily. They have to bring those
I was
back.
ready with the
And,
pole in my hand.
to and from
Josie
school.
laughed at the sight of me as I passed her. The abominable snowman, I said, and then I was outside trying to decide. I could fish from the bank or the old man's bridge. The bank was closer, so I walked along the tree line and down to a spot almost in front of the house. I swung the pole lure on the line over the ice into a narrow stream of water. I didn't know how long I stood there fishing, but after a while I leaned back against a bare maple tree, watching movement on the other side of the river. Just the quickest bit of color. A squirrel? A raccoon? But then I saw it was something larger, a deer. It took one more moment to realize that a person, maybe a fisherman, was standing there back among the trees, and if I had seen him, he might be able to see me. The pole slid out of my hands as I lurched backward toward the holly bushes. Another quick step and Stephen's sweater pulled away on a branch. I looked back to see the pole on the snowy bank. It had sunk into the snow so that it couldn't be seen. There was just a narrow indentation in the snow. It might have been only a branch if anyone spotted it. My mouth was dry, and I looked across the river again. There was no movement on the other side. A scoop of snow slid off one of the branches. A blue jay teetered on another. I turned and I ran the last few steps toward the house and up to the porch. I reached for the door, closed and locked it in back of me, and leaned against it inside, taking deep breaths. "What is it?" Josie asked. I shook my head. "Maybe another fisherman. Don't worry." Christmas was coming, and maybe it was someone cutting down a tree or poaching in the old man's woods. All right. It was all right. He hadn't seen me, and we were safe. Josie put on her scarf and her coat and wandered outside. To breathe for a moment, she told me. I stayed near the window watching, but there wasn't anyone there. No one there at all. 10th picture, Hollis Woods. I know what people mean when they say they feel as if they're floating. That's the way I felt, as if my feet weren't attached to the ground, as if they were bouncing off the floor, touching lightly and bouncing again. And inside me, it was as if bubbles were drifting, bumping gently into each other. I was happy. No, that doesn't even describe it. I was jubilant. I was ecstatic. I drew it using all the pencils, yellows and oranges, pinks and blues. I drew purple shoes on my feet and wings on my shoulders. My eyes were closed, the way you see pictures of angels, sometimes with their eyelashes down on their cheeks. So does it make sense that I wasn't thinking? That all that floating and all those bubbles made me think I could do anything? And so that last week, all I thought about was going to the top of Old Man's Mountain and shouting to the whole world. I even knew what I was going to say. Here I am, Hollis Woods, who didn't deserve to be in a family. Tough Hollis Woods, running away. Hollis Woods, look at me. I climbed the mountain. Now I belong. And we will come back with chapter 12 next week.